Oh, here's the other thing. Most Americans are wrong about crime. Let's watch this one as well. This is the Hasanabi is right.
In the fall of 2022, we conducted 100 interviews in New York, Seattle, Chicago, Philadelphia.
Hannah Love, she researches cities and public safety at the Brookings Institution.
What we overwhelmingly heard from folks was fear of crime in downtown business districts.
It was 2 years into the pandemic, and in the middle of what felt like an explosion of American crime
spiking on the streets of cities across the country. Grapple with crime has increased.
Nationwide spike in
violent crime in the U.S. is rising.
Homicides increased by 36%.
Are all these video shows stealing your jokes make you believe in IP? No, dude. What are you talking about? It's awesome. I want everyone to repeat what I have to say. I want people to fucking internalize what I have to say. I want people to believe what I have to say. I want people to fucking also, advocate on the same fucking boundaries. If you think that the way I communicate these messages are good, then that's great. I don't give a fuck that the most popular fucking television program that is like, somewhat more progressive than the average mainstream media program is like repeating a lot of the things that I've said time and time again, even if it's like jokes. I don't give a shit. It's awesome.
But since then, the story has gotten a little more confusing. Sometimes the news says that crime is going down, but other times,
crime is turning cities into war zones.
FBI is underreporting
random acts of violence.
2/3 of Americans say crime in the U.S. is a very or extremely serious problem. And more than 3/4 of us say that there's more crime than a year ago. So, which is it? Crime up or crime down? And if it is down, what exactly do most Americans actually think is happening with crime? So my first question was, okay, when the news says that crime has decreased, where's that info coming from? I asked my colleague Abdullah.
My name is Abdullah Fayyad. I'm a policy correspondent at Vox. The two areas that we get our crime statistics from are the FBI crime database. Law enforcement agencies around the country voluntarily report their crime data. The other is the National Crime Victimization Survey, which is administered by the federal government and asks people directly whether or not they have been victims of a crime.
And both of these sources have their own limitations. The survey usually talks to around 250,000 people, which is both a lot of people and only about 0.07% of the country. And the FBI's data is by nature only made up of crimes that get reported to police. That's actually a big reason the FBI's data on homicide is one of the most widely studied and cited crime statistics, because murder is almost always reported. Now, right now this chart ends in 2019. Add 2020, and we see murder spike.
There is a reason why people feel like crime is going up, because crime was going up.
But experts we talked to also recommended putting that spike into.
The dipshit shouting crime, crime, crime has to be one of my favorites. Yeah, it was so funny. It was a perfect distillation of like why the Republican crime panic failed. Like they were excited that crime was happening so that they could potentially fucking win.
To context of the way that things were before this, what sociologists and criminologists refer to as the great crime decline of the 90s. And if you extend the chart in the other direction too, all the way to 2023, that 2020 spike starts to look temporary. It's now falling. Not yet to where it was before the pandemic, but down. So that's homicide, but we can also look at the FBI's broader violent crime rate over that same period of time, which also looks like it's falling. The national property crime rate is a similar story. This doesn't mean that all crime is going down everywhere, but it does mean it's down in most places. And yet, 77% of us say the opposite is true. So let's look closer at that. The polling organization Gallup has actually been asking Americans this question for about 35 years, and their data on how people have answered it over that time gives us a clue on how to interpret it. Because it turns out, with the exception of like 2 years, a majority of Americans have always said that crime is higher than it was last year.
What we're seeing is a consistent fear about crime, despite the fact that over the same period of time, crime had been steadily.
You think this will convince your uncle? Fuck no. Dude, I think you need to understand something very important, okay? Not only are we unimaginably susceptible to propaganda, we also personally don't want to ever admit that we're wrong, okay? So no, like once you get swept away and very publicly just plant your fucking flag, especially in a society where there is no reward for coming to a correct conclusion and saying, my bad, there is no reason for you to ever change your mind. Think about it this way. There have been instances where I've gotten stuff wrong and apologized for, and yet for years and years and years, does that include you? See, people are immediately either A, skeptical that I myself, when I get something wrong, immediately own up to it and apologize for it, or B, always consistently throw it in my face. Look, this person is obviously using the example of how people punish you. When you get something wrong and you say, my bad, I was wrong on this, people go, you're backtracking. This chatter is not making a joke, or I mean, this chatter is just saying that, like, that is what it's called. Okay. Or I guess he's making a joke. I didn't think you were like saying that to me in particular. I just mean that, like, that is how people operate. People instantly in that moment will go, you're backtracking, you're a fucking idiot. Right? There's a term for it. And that is very annoying. So for that reason, there's no reason to ever say that you're wrong. Own up to it. Just fucking move on. Move on with your life. Plant your feet firmly, double down, triple down, quadruple down. Now, obviously, if you're, if you have your own personal moral compass, your own personal convictions, and you don't want to, even if you think people are not going to recognize that you're admitting that you're wrong on something, you should still obviously apologize or admit that you were wrong and move on. I do it all the time, regardless of the way fucking people operate. Who gives a shit? Anyway, just be honest every time. My honesty is the best policy. Mary Cherry, thank you for the 20 gifted subs. Here, let's continue.
On the decline.
And it's also worth taking a similar look at this chart from earlier, where 2/3 of Americans say crime is a very or extremely serious problem in the US. We can also chart that over time and see that it is also a pretty consistent belief. But Gallup also asked another version of that question. How serious a problem is crime in your area? And only a small minority of Americans typically say that crime where they live is a very or extremely serious problem. In other words,
the vast majority of Americans feel safe, but there's this kind of abstract perception of crime is out of control.
Crime is out of control, but not.
It's always somewhere else. It's always somewhere else. Crime is out of control. Not in my neighborhood. My neighborhood's fine, but everywhere else, crime is out of control. Crime is out of control. I can't go to the streets. I can't go to the big city. I'm scared. Homosexual criminals are going to have sex with me. They're going to do butt stuff.
Not where I am, but somewhere. That somewhere was partly the subject of Hannah's research interviews, many of which, remember, were about a specific fear in a specific place.
The fear of random acts of violence downtown.
Violent crime downtown, in the parts of cities where people go to work. Hannah and her team found that interesting because they also did a geographic analysis of where in cities crime was happening.
When we crunched the data, we found that there was a significant mismatch in perception and reality of crime, particularly as it pertains to where crime occurs.
In Chicago, for example, they found that most of the increase in gun deaths in 2020 happened in disadvantaged neighborhoods on the west, south, and southwest sides, and barely at all in the dense downtown Loop area. In New York, they found that in the busiest parts of the city, violent crime only increased about 2% from 2019 to 2022, compared to an 8% increase in the rest of the city.
Downtowns were not driving any sort of citywide increases in crime, even though people felt as though they were.
So even when violent crime was higher, it wasn't high where people thought it was high. But why did people think that? Hold on to that thought, because slight tone change. This video.
Oh my God, it's like insane that they just like make these fucking commentators do like BetterHelp as like YouTubers nowadays on Vox. Has the disagreement ruined your relationship with your uncle? No, because he's my uncle and I love him unconditionally. That's blood. So no, it has not ruined my relationship with my uncle. That's crazy. The uncle-nephew bond is impenetrable. It's a fortress. Okay?
All right, so we were looking at this data that showed us that
Hassan's fall off needs to be studied. Brother, how about you study the ways in which I've actually fucking developed an audience of this size so you can take it back to your dumbass streamer's fucking community and maybe he will get to my fall off level so you can fucking do victory laps. Okay? Fuck you mean? Your favorite streamer doesn't come to this fucking level, doesn't even touch my fall off level. What are we talking about? How about you fall on? That's crazy. That's crazy.
There has been significant improvements in violent and property crimes in every region of the country, but prominent Republicans aren't just reluctant to celebrate the good news, they are pretending that it does not exist. On NBC News, Representative Byron Donalds told viewers, "I think it's important for people to understand your murder rate may be down, but that doesn't mean that violent crime, etc. are also lower. But violent crime, etc., really are lower." Around the same time, Senator Tim Scott said that under Joe Biden, we have seen the movement to defund the police, leaving communities like the one I grew up in devastated and ravaged by a wave of violent crime that we have not seen literally in 5 decades. Prominent Republican voices, including those seeking national office, likely know that crime rates are falling. That does not appear to stop them from telling the public the opposite of the truth, working from the assumption that many voters will simply believe the falsehoods and never hear about actual crime data.
While people thought urban downtowns were really dangerous, they actually weren't. Now, one reason people thought that might have been media coverage.
Crime continues to concentrate within neighborhoods where it's always been bad, but community or everyday gun violence often doesn't make the headlines as much as something that would happen in a wealthier or more tourist-based district.
2 violent attacks in Times Square.
2 separate stabbings in Center City.
4 robberies that have happened downtown.
But Hannah found that the people she talked to weren't just seeing stuff on TV. They were also reacting to something they were seeing in person.
When we were doing our interviews, people often conflated crime and unsheltered homelessness within the same breath.
One thing that has changed a bit since the pandemic is in who you see on the streets in these downtown neighborhoods. Before the pandemic, that would be overwhelmingly office workers, some tourists, but there were also always some number of people on the streets experiencing homelessness, addiction, mental health issues. And then the pandemic emptied these places out, and as office workers and tourists slowly returned...
When there's less people crowding the streets, you're more likely to see things like visible.
That's it. I've also, once again, described this quite a bit as well. People see the visible homelessness and immediately attribute it to the skyrocketing crime rates. And in certain instances, a homeless person might be engaging in some crime. That is, I'm not going to say that that doesn't happen. Of course it does. Having said that, however, the way to solve homelessness is not the exact same way that you would actually solve like a murder, for example, something that you think of when you actually think of real crimes. A homeless person has nowhere to fucking go. You have to create a systemic solution to a systemic problem. The solution, of course, is not more jails and more prisons. The solution would be to fix the housing market and build more housing and have a housing first anti-homelessness policy initiative. Put them in homes. Build public housing. But I digress.
Homelessness or visible drug use.
Today, more of us are back in offices, but there are also, by some accounts, simply more vulnerable people on the streets, partly due to the cutting of social services. For example, by 2022, New York State had 20% fewer psychiatric beds for people with severe mental illness than it had in 2014. And from 2019 to 2023, the number of Americans experiencing unsheltered homelessness went up by more than 20%.
I live in Boston, where over the past few years, there has been a homeless encampment that does create this public perception that there is not just disorder, but chaos in how the city is running itself. Even if, those encampments don't necessarily pose, an imminent threat.
Once again, I'm going to go back to the very obvious troll. He said, Hassan, I'm studying your fall off in modern soy boy history class. They should probably fucking put that in your modern soy boy history class. Brother, if I'm a motherfucking soy boy sitting at 6'4" and my lightest in the past couple of years at 235 pounds, okay, not soaking wet. You might be soaking wet. Your mom might be soaking wet. I'm dry. 235 pounds, then what is the average American? What is your favorite streamer? If I am a soy boy, who's your favorite streamer? Thor Bjornsson? Who is out there? Who is out there? Motherfuckers be like, I love Ben Shapiro. He's a beacon of masculinity. He's my alpha dog. I love Sneeko. That's the real alpha male right there. Then come in here and call me a soy boy. I can't even get enough protein if I ate you for breakfast. Okay? I can't even hit my daily macronutrients. And you're out here calling me a motherfucking soy boy. Fuck you mean? Fuck you mean? I eat 1.5 pounds of straight white chicken breast every goddamn day. I weigh my protein. I weigh my chicken. I had 17.5 ounces of straight white chicken breast just today. That's not 1.5 pounds. That's only 1 pound and change. But still, who's the motherfucking soy boy? Anyway, let's keep going.
Or danger to the residents that live in those areas.
Changes like these can make a city feel different, even less safe. But all the data we have tells us that equating vulnerable people with crime is not correct. And here's the problem with that.
If people don't feel safe, then we're not accomplishing our task. Stats don't matter if people don't believe they are in a safe environment.
What we're currently seeing.
That's a crazy thing for a cop mayor to say. I guess because he's a cop mayor, it's expected. But it's just like, that's crazy. Stats don't matter when people don't feel safe. Like, what the fuck?
Right now is a lot of politicians and policymakers crafting policy based on perception rather than evidence.
The governor of New York sent the National Guard to patrol the New York City subway. Crime on the subway had already been on the decline.
That's an explicit example right there of having perception-based policy take a lot of municipal resources and taxpayer money without having any results because it's in the wrong place.
A lot of what we're seeing are counterproductive policy solutions to crime in the long term. Harsher penalties for petty crime that include eliminating eligibility for parole and probation. In San Francisco, voters imposed drug test requirements on welfare recipients. Tough on crime bills that we kind of felt like the country was moving away from, over the last 10, 15 years, and now are coming back in a very big way.
In a way, this is an impossible story to tell. Try telling the victim of an actual crime that crime is down. Try telling it to a country seeing real crimes on TV. Last time I'll show you this chart, and I want you to tell me which of the following 2 clips fits it better.
Last year, the murder rate saw the sharpest decrease in history. Violent crime fell to one of its lowest levels in more than 50 years.
Shut up, bitch. You were the one who was like, we gotta fucking keep funding the police. Crime is out of control. You said that too, Brandon. Dumb fuck. Where was that attitude? Why didn't you demand cooler heads to prevail? Instead of listening to our hearts, we must listen to our heads. Crime has been on a steady decline with an increase in the aftermath of COVID. Ripping through the streets. You could have said that shit. No, you didn't, though. You didn't say that. You were like, nope, we got to give cops all the COVID resources. Yeah. Expect the Democratic Party to do some pro-immigration rhetoric in a little bit after they fucking cook the books and complain about the immigrant panic in a similar capacity, mind you. Remember, just like I'm right on this fucking crime shit and was right and never back down, regardless of how much people came in here and chirped at me, the same shit is happening with immigration. Okay?
Fund the police Democrats have turned our once great cities into cesspools of bloodshed and crime.
In April 2024, an ABC News poll found that voters trust Donald Trump over Joe Biden on crime and safety by a margin of 8 percentage points. I was honestly surprised it wasn't more than that. Imagine that the homicide rate kept falling like this.
Oh, here it comes fucking Mr. Pennsylvania with some stats. Fast decline was in Philly with a progressive DA that tried to impeach at the state level with an unprecedented anti-democratic move. Turns out the left was right. Yup. Larry Krasner, George Soros, DA right there. What happened, Philly? What happened, Philadelphia? What happened to all the naysayers? What happened to all the naysayers? Everyone's like, oh, George Soros, DA, district attorney, he's progressive, he's woke, he's gay, he's releasing criminals left and right. Murder rate fucking steep decline in Philly. What the fuck happened? Meanwhile, Philadelphia is still number one on the murder rate. In when you put Benjamin Netanyahu, a designated war criminal, on the board as a Philadelphia resident. Let's be real. Let's be for fucking real. Benjamin Netanyahu still got way more bodies. Technically, Philly is out of control on the murder rate, but...
And that by 2025 or 2026, you saw it get to its lowest in decades. How many people would believe you?
Let me tell you, not many, okay? Hi, Philly guy here. They still shooting just worse shots. That's funny.
This news story is from 2023. Republicans have often criticized progressive policies for fueling crime, but cities without those policies are also seeing high rates of crime. In Tulsa, Oklahoma, a Republican-led city, basic needs not being met is helping to fuel crime, according to Dr. Tiffany Crutcher, the executive director of the Terence Crutcher Foundation. The GOP has seized on Democrats' support for criminal justice reform in recent election cycles, arguing these policies lead to higher crime rates in large cities. Instead, Republicans have offered tough on crime and pro-police positions, which has helped them secure control of Congress during the 2020 midterm elections. However, a city's partisan lean generally does not necessarily correlate with its crime rate, according to data compiled by Newsweek. Places like New York City or Los Angeles, frequently cast as crime-ridden by Republicans, have crime rates on par or lower than many cities led by Republicans. If you enjoyed this video, then make sure to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more videos like this, and thanks for watching.